One. My name's Mike Snyder. I'm your humble moderator here for the session. And pleased to see so many faces, and thanks for joining us here in this mixed bag session. First up, we have presentation by Sam Lincoln on how is the changing climate affecting logging capacity. Pleased to have Sam joining us here. Sam, man, I could go on, but I'm gonna go from the script here. Sam was born and raised in Randolph Center, Vermont, on his family's dairy farm. He began his logging career working as a skidder operator on a timber salvage in the Northfield Mountain Range after the '98 ice storm. Subsequently worked for his father-in-law's logging business. Beginning in 2004, Sam purchased his first grapple skidder and continued to modernize the operation, eventually becoming fully mechanized and logging year-round while scaling back the family's agricultural enterprises. In 2017, he was appointed to serve in the Governor Scott's administration as Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation, alongside me as Commissioner. With a particular focus, Sam was brought in to help us really drill into the forest economy and rural economic development through forestry. Here's where I'm going to editorialize and say, if you ever want a good deputy, look no further than Sam Lincoln. He was absolutely top-notch and the best, and really proud of the work that we got to do together and how much I learned from Sam. Sam, unfortunately, from my perspective, stepped down at the end of 2020, leaving me alone to restart his mechanized logging operation. Importantly, in 2022, he and other forward-looking Vermont logging contractors began working with the Professional Logging Contractors of Maine to expand the organization to what has now become the Professional Logging Contractors of the Northeast, a regional trade association run by loggers for loggers. He is one of 3 Vermont logging contractors serving on the PLC Board of Directors. He and his wife, Ashley, are proud parents of Matt and John, 20 and 17, respectively, who are both finding their way as entrepreneurs and working lands business owners. Really thrilled to have Sam and his unique perspective from reality joining us here today. Please help me in welcoming Sam Lincoln.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. It was a pleasure working with you and to have the kind words of introduction. How do I advance the slides? Do I push the arrow?
Did you try that one?
Yep. Maybe didn't hit it hard enough.
You know what? We're not in presentation mode. Here's help.
There we go.
All right. Good to go.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. That's right. It's good to have a millennial at the helm here with the technology. Thank you, everyone. Just to talk a little bit about my business, my operational philosophy as we get into the nuts and bolts of the session. My unofficial mission of my logging operation is to provide forestry operations to landowners with integrity, using best practices while striving for continuous improvement. These are 3 guiding principles that never become obsolete or outdated. I always think about things with an adapt, modernize, and thrive mindset, and I'm always looking for a better way to inform decision-making that results in efficiency, profitability, and a better work environment for me and my employees. This slide is a screenshot of a spreadsheet. So I tend to track, I'm a little bit of a spreadsheet and data freak. I tend to track a lot of our operational productivity. We operate a traditional whole tree mechanized logging operation, feller buncher, grapple skidder, loader, slasher, delimber. Nearly all my clients are enrolled in the use value appraisal program with management plans. We occasionally do some land clearing, mostly for dairy farms, expanding pastures and farmland, but sometimes for development. When I evaluate a timber sale, I do my best to account for every potential cost. And I developed a spreadsheet a long time ago that I go to with every job, looking at every potential expense of logging from when we unchain the first machine off the low bed till we shake out the last bale of straw at the end. I utilize QuickBooks, and in my accounting, I track each job, the profit and loss of each logging timber sale that we do. The screenshot is an example of tracking feller buncher productivity costs on a per ton, per day, per load basis. We track every hitch that we pull and every day, so we have an idea of trends, and we can make better decisions in the future based on the productivity of jobs. We look at the terrain, skid distance, value, and diameter of timber. And we do the same, we track machine hours in the same way. That helps, again, make better decisions. So what are logging contractors experiencing in the woods right now? Changing weather patterns. Nearly 18 months of unsuitable ground conditions due to excessive rainfall and or a lack of freezing temperatures. Washed out trails, roads, landings, bridges, culverts, and stream crossings. In Vermont, we had a major flood on July 10th. Almost 10 inches of rain in central Vermont. Many loggers had already been idled for weeks prior to that due to the wet conditions. Some loggers couldn't access their job sites for weeks after the July flooding just due to the roads being washed out. What that's meant for us is loggers are purchasing additional stone and gravel for roads and landings. Significant hours are being spent on excavators and bulldozers just to maintain trails during the day. We've been pausing job sites due to ground conditions, moving to new sites to work temporarily and move back. And it also creates a need for temporary closeout procedures to be employed. Loggers have been the shock absorber for variable weather conditions. We've signed timber sale contracts that essentially set things in stone with our obligations to landowners and job site conditions, and the variables of weather have thrown a major financial impact at us operationally, financially. As Jack Bell from Longview Forest said to me this winter, we can't just keep sending people to work in the woods to do AMPs every day. BMPs in other states are AMPs here. But we just can't afford to keep doing this. In recognition of the effort professional logging contractors are putting in to protect each job site, I'm describing this situation as an environmental protection success story that's resulted in an economic disaster in the logging capacity of the region. As loggers shut down jobs, pause jobs, put in all this extra effort to protect the forest infrastructure. I'll also mention that markets have been volatile, to say the least, and given the weather and lost logging capacity, it's highly concerning that there's still downward pressure on pricing that we're seeing at the job. I'm receiving 47% less for softwood pulp on a per ton basis than I was 10 to 12 years ago, and my costs have gone up significantly. Loggers and truckers are experiencing a significant impact from inflation in the cost of parts, fuel, repairs, labor, interest, you name it. Northeast logging contractors have historically been accustomed to ground conditions suitable to harvesting timber for 160 to 180 days annually. That's days of production that you're putting wood on a landing. Not maintenance, not road building, things like that. Depending on a lot of factors, exceeding that number could lead to water quality compliance issues. Coming in under that average greatly reduces a business owner's viability and the ability to properly service a mechanized operations, overhead, and operational expenses. For winter harvesting, we're seeing highly variable number of days we can work. So this trend right here is just my own operation. As I said, I track every hitch we pull every single day. And 2021, we were only able to work 153 days. 2022, that went down to 149. 2023, we were at 103 days. We've only worked 40 days so far this winter. We haven't turned a wheel on my operation in 30 days as of tomorrow. And winter logging, last winter was a terribly short winter. We worked 73 days. This last winter, we only worked 56 days. So there's a considerable impact on production and revenue on logging operations in this weather right now. Logging contractors can use a goal of 10% return on investment as a gauge of profitability. And considering that some, including myself, are experiencing revenue losses up to 30% over the whole year, there's just no opportunity for profit right now in a logging business. Loggers that are consistently losing money must cut costs somewhere to stay in business. And you don't know where that's going to be or how that's going to be, but it's a significant impact. The Department of Forest Parks and Recreation distributed a survey, the Vermont Forest Economy Loss and Damage Survey, after the flooding last summer. A lot of loggers stepped forward and asked for some type of help because of the impact of the prior winter and the flooding, when millions of dollars were being put out in flood relief. And so to gauge what was actually going on, the department put out a survey through the sector. And I'll just talk quickly just about logging and trucking. Out of $2.8 million in reported economic losses, just over $2 million of that was from loggers and truckers, 6 times more than the next closest category in the forest economy. The survey only covered a period of about 7 weeks, so the losses to the forest economy are considerably higher than what was reported as we look at that 18 months. And again, unfortunately, loggers and truckers have not been eligible for any relief funds that were set up. Because they were revenue loss, not damage to physical assets, which typically are insurable too. But revenue loss is typically not something you can insure. So what practices are we employing in forest operations to deal with this? Adapting to wetter summer conditions is one. One of the things we do is we use Avenza maps extensively for planning, preparing. What do our skid trails look like? How long are they? I budget for how much I'm going to potentially need to water bar. I do as many of those measurements as I can before I take a job. And I also use Avenza maps to document closeout on a site. You know, with Avenza, those round symbols are water bars. That's the job closeout we did in summer of 2022. There's 330 water bars installed on the skid trails on that job. And so in an average time in an excavator of 6 minutes per water bar, and if, you know, we're not going to have the whole job open at once, but if we have summer rains and we have to water bar a third of that job 2, 3, 4 times because of heavy rains, there's a significant expense. There's thousands and thousands of dollars of not only machine expense and labor, but lost production and revenue, that time that we have an operator out of a skidder that's in an excavator. Other projects that we're seeing a greater expense on is road building. This particular project, the landowner happens to be here that we did this job for. We'd anticipated this being maybe 5-6 loads of stone to access a landing. We thought it was just a relatively small wet spot in the job. It ended up being 50 loads of stone, had to put under drain in, geotextile fabric, and it turned into a considerable project that was not necessarily anticipated at the beginning. And we had to work all that out to, you know, absorb that cost into the project. And so that's something we're seeing more, is a need for much more extensive road building in the summer and the wintertime. Places that used to be a slam dunk out across the farmer's hayfield to get to a woodlot, we're putting crane mats down. We can't put 100,000-pound log trucks out across the ground anymore. On the positive side of this investment is the landowner now has a really great access to that parcel for long term. We've been upsizing culverts on access roads and trails to handle the high volume of rain events, and increasing the number of temporary skidder bridge installations we do. This tool, I don't know if anybody's familiar, on the USGS website has this drainage tool. We put in a bridge, and this is just an example of calculating the size culverts or bridges we need to do. You can click on a point on a stream and measure that. We put in a bridge there for a 1,678 acre drainage. Just really helpful for us in right sizing what we're putting in for water quality protection. Something that we're doing more now too is using filter socks and ditches and at culvert outlets. You know, I started using these in 2016, and it was almost like going through the motions of putting something like that in place. You didn't really see much impact of it, but I can say that in 8 years, we're starting to see things like these filter socks. This is next to a temporary skidder bridge installation. I don't think I have a picture of the after, but by the time this job was done, that little sediment trap and the filter sock, it was just completely buried in silt. We're having to like dig those things out to let them refill again and keep sediment from going into streams. So we're just seeing this change in the need to do these things to protect runoff and sediment. But they're expensive. Buying straw bale, that's straw mulch, putting in those things. Those are $30, $40 a piece, and it takes time to get out there and install that. Another major practice that we've employed a lot more that's not new, but it's just we're doing a lot more of it, is brush corduroy on trails. We're intentionally sorting wood at the landing, small diameter hardwood, top wood that we might normally chip. We're turning that, we cut it 12 feet wide, 12 feet long, so it carries well behind the grapple skidder. And we're putting it out into the trails, sometimes laying hundreds, if not thousands of feet now of brush corduroy to support the equipment and prevent rutting in the woods. And it's almost like road building. We use coarse, bigger diameter trees at the beginning to hit the really muddy spots, smaller diameter brush maybe to fill in, and then we're using, you know, spruce fir, hemlock brush off the delimber. It's like an intentional practice to fill and smooth and stabilize those trails, and again, protect from rutting. It takes a lot of time. We figure we lose a significant amount of productivity every time that skidder's going back into the woods laying corduroy. And then we're fixing it just, you know, when holes pop up in it. And it's tough on a skidder operator driving over corduroy all day long, just that bumping along back and forth. I worry about operator fatigue. But one of the positives, again, of this, it's taking a lot of time, it takes money. But one of the positives we're seeing from this is that it's really reducing our closeout costs when the trails are stabilized. If we're on a site that the landowner is okay with this happening, or it's maybe a more of a piece of land they're not going to be recreating on, that's in place for the long, you know, it's there. We don't have to fix ruts. We're not bulldozing those trails. We just get water bars in where we need to. In the wintertime, we're adapting to wetter, less frozen conditions. Mid-December of this last year, we had just begun to freeze up our trails, and we had a major rain event. We had over 2.5 inches of rain. Same thing. So we're going out on frozen trails on steep ground now and trying to water bar frozen ground. And when we have half, 3/4 of a mile of trail that all comes to the landing, and so breaking up those frozen trails, you know, we found trying to break that up with a feller buncher head. We got these big plates of frozen soil. They don't make good water bars. And then when you get that rain event, the water goes right through them. I don't think I've ever had worse erosion on a job than I did in last December, even though we'd put a huge amount of effort into preparing for that storm. And so like our landing, we'd had a few poles in there. That's a 12-inch pipe that's running half full right off the back of our landing. There's so much water. The ground, as I describe, it's liquefied soil we're dealing with on some sites. We're having to add brush and do things. This is one of our brushed in trails, and the water just followed under the brush, and we couldn't work. We had to stop. We're finding that we have to put ditches on skid trails. We're actually ditching with an excavator or a feller buncher to keep water out of our skid trails. We've just never seen so much water in the woods as we have in this past 18 months. So is bad weather a new issue for logging contractors? Absolutely not. What's new now? You know, we've always contended with, you know, occasional early spring thaw. We've always contended with a few weeks of rainy weather here or there, but bad weather is never unplanned, or bad weather may be unplanned, but it shouldn't be unexpected. And you should be prepared for that. But what's happening? What's the difference now? Frequency, severity, and duration of these weather patterns that are creating these unsuitable conditions. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it's having a major impact on logger and trucker profitability. So how is it changing the way I do business? A lot more preparation, and the job sites are intentionally chosen based on soil type, ground conditions, what are going to be the water quality protection costs. We're choosing markets based on proximity and trucking distance, where it's a lot more important. If we can only get trucks into a job 1 or 2 days a week now, how many trips a day round trip can those trucks make is far more important now than it ever used to be. So some of the local markets, like, you know, there's a new log yard that opened up near us, and it's become a lifeline for us because the trucks can go right back and forth if they can only haul that time. It's adding cost to short hauling. We have to short haul wood off the jobs when we can only get back out into the woods a day or two a week, and we have high production jobs. We have to get the volume off out onto the side of a main road somewhere. That's not new. Everybody knows that's what we've done, but it's happening a lot more than it ever used to. In the past 36 months, I purchased an excavator and a feller buncher because we had so much demand on our subcontractors that they couldn't get to us. So it's like we're working less, our costs are going up just to have lower production. It's a it's a kind of a dangerous economic formula, I think. We're also buying crane mats, steel pipes, more sediment control, doing all these things. And we integrate these into the cost of timber sales. It's necessary, but it's tough, but there's just so much unpredictability and uncertainty. Employee retention is a real concern. How are we going to keep employees busy and working when you have such sporadic work periods? I consider the people that work for me really skilled and talented. And how do you have an employee, a really high caliber employee that you say, I don't have any work for 2 weeks. I don't have any work for a month. We're going to be down, what you can't look at that forecast and say, well, hey, sorry, but we don't have any work for 3 months, which is what has happened. So the workforce issues that we're already seeing in society are being exacerbated by the ground conditions we're seeing on logging operations. Some of my peers, I talked to some of my I talk with a lot of loggers, but just talking with them, what do they think? How are they adapting? Just the need, again, excavator, bulldozer on site is almost a must. Operating in less than ideal conditions is becoming normalized. I've heard this from loggers. I've heard it from consulting foresters. I've heard it from regulatory foresters. The idea of ruts, muddy ruts, different things that maybe wouldn't have been acceptable in the past are now becoming normalized. And ugly conditions are being created that then are going back and being repaired with excavators and bulldozers. And I think some loggers are looking for a shift to more fee for services type work, view clearing, trail construction, land conversion for development and agriculture. I have talked to quite a few loggers that are considering a switch to maybe winter only logging, or finding, something else to do the rest of the year. And there is diversification going on. We've added a firewood processor. We're probably going to grow more in our excavation business because of the uncertainty of when we can deploy equipment in the woods. So how do we move forward? There's a lot of uncertainty. Why would loggers move forward? Why would anyone want to stay in the business with all these conditions? I think, speaking for myself, and I think many others that are experiencing the same things, we have decades, if not generations, invested in our businesses as part of our family. We have major capital investments in this, and we don't know what's going to happen, but we want to see it through to the other end. We don't want to quit. We want to keep working. We want to keep providing this service to our community. So we have to find a way. As mentioned, I'm on the board of directors of the PLC of the Northeast now. We've got a suite of policy priorities that we developed, and one includes a cost share BMP program, like is done in the Watershed Ag Council Forestry BMP program in New York. We'll know this week if that will pass the House budget of $1 million of cost share for pre-harvest construction of roads, landings, bridges, culverts, sediment control, to do a cost share program for that. We're looking at low interest financing to transition to low ground pressure equipment, using some federal clean water money for that. We have a number of things that we're trying to do to adapt. There's no silver bullet, but people want to move ahead. We want to reinvest in our businesses and grow and have our families be able to make a living doing this. But a couple other quick, I have Mike asked me to make recommendations to foresters. I didn't know I didn't have the whole hour and a half for that part of the presentation. But a few things that I would say that are really important from my perspective and others, loggers. Prepare landowners for the climate impacts on logging costs is something that foresters can do that would be really helpful. There's just a lot of ways that cost is assigned in a timber sale contract, but the reality is it's becoming a major variable, and loggers can't continue to keep absorbing it. Have alternate timber sales prepared. We're starting to see April and May become far more dry than it has been, drier than it's been traditionally. Nobody's really used to deploying logging equipment to go back into the woods in April and May. But when we're down to working 100 days a year, if we can gain 10, 20, 30, 40 days in April and May, if you all can prepare jobs and have those alternate sites ready, that's going to be huge. The other thing is to generally have a suite of jobs that are ready. We're just seeing too many times now that we've had to shut down and relocate, mobilize to another job. And if those other options are there, that's going to make a big difference. Supporting professional logging contractors, the ones that are investing in their business, that are invested in the future, the ones that invest in safety training, workers' comp coverage on their employees, have their back, please. Let's support them and make sure they have a path to the future, that they're not being sold out to the lowest or highest bidder just to get a job done. Because I would say that there's major vulnerability like I've never seen in the logging capacity of the region right now. And we want good loggers, professional loggers, companies to move forward. I'm going to stop there. I know I'm pretty running up against the clock. I want to stop for questions. So.
Great job, Sam. Thank
Thanks.
you. And let's start right here, Keith.
Sam, you track your numbers pretty well. Do you have an estimate what the change in the cost of A&P implementation has been?
I don't, but I know that it just becomes these enormous anomalies where I have a job I talked to about in the summer of 2022 where we'd budgeted to water bar it 2 times that summer, and I stopped tracking it at the 8th time I'd water barred that job. So you could see a 10-fold increase in those kind of expenses unpredictably, that much of a growth.
You want to do them, Sam? You can be the point.
Sure, right here.
How much of this has been or can be passed along to the landowner in terms of lower stumpage?
I think that's a significant variable about stumpage. It's all depends on probably the dynamic between the landowner, consulting forester, managing the job, the logger, the negotiating skills, the recognition of the need to do that. I don't think there's any one size fits all. That's why we're asking for public support to help take that pressure off us, because we know we can't absorb it anymore. I'll just start over here, way in the back, sitting down there.
This is kind of a follow-up on that prior question. We've got more and more landowners who aren't necessarily interested in the economics of jobs, and foresters are selling jobs based on things like carbon and wildlife values, et cetera, et cetera. Is it time for the logging community to start thinking about different models besides stumpage to handle the cost of a job? Because I've got more and more landowners who, for them, it is almost a fee for service, right? So rather than finding new fee for service professions like land healing, clearing, construction, et cetera, offer logging services as a fee for service sort of opportunity for landowners where you can hire a logger to do some things that are improving the ecological values of the job.
I think absolutely. I think that's the mindset that we have to shift from. And it's all going to depend on the project, the landowner goals, landowner finances, the value of the timber that's going to be maybe removed from the site, things like that. But absolutely, I think that's what a lot of us are looking to, is how are we going to get enough revenue out of these projects? I'll just move across. Graham.
Getting money to do closeout and stuff like that, cost share program. And I also think that it's important that we consider, some kind of broader subsidies for logging. Just as farmers have crop insurance and are covered when their crops get flooded out. And I just heard on the radio last week about apple growers in Vermont who lost their crops last year because of early frost. I mean, we essentially lost our crop over the last year of trees, but like you said, there was nothing after the July flooding that provided any revenue support for us.
We talked to the federal delegation a little bit about, my ag background. There's crop insurance. There's all kinds of crop disaster programs. There's nothing in place for loggers. There's stuff in place for forest landowners. I kind of hate to go down that road, but the reality is I think we're at the doorstep of it. I don't see how we go forward without an index insurance or some kind of revenue loss insurance for loggers to be able to keep the capital investment they have and deal with this variable weather.
We got time to squeeze one more in. This is great. Let's choose one, Sam.
Choose one, gentleman here.
Because the number of logging days dropped precipitously, I've been in the Appalachians where it's really even worse. I got 2 months without even working. The question is, have you found are you dealing with contracts now with changing terms? My contracts automatically have an extension clause with an option for a second one. And that's what I'm wondering, are you being held, your feet being held to find, these contracts all have terms. It's like, you got to finish it 18 months which is, I can't imagine now. But that's the question, are you having to negotiate different terms or even extensions before you even buy the timber?
Not so much that in my particular instance. I think that that's not uncommon what you talked about. My own instance, it's much more about who's going to pay for the infrastructure, roads, bridges, landings, the excessive number of water bars and closeout costs, things like that. But I think, again, I think it's going to be up to the loggers have to understand that cost, calculate that cost. The foresters and landowners need to recognize that cost. And it's got to be shared. It can't, and it's not always on the logger. I talked to a forester the other day who told me that he and the logger agree to a water quality, an AMP, BMP cost at the outset of the job, and that's automatically deducted off the total gross stumpage. And that's a pretty fair way to do it. But is there a variability factor built into that too? Landowner doesn't want to go into a timber sale and think they're going to get X tens of thousands of dollars of revenue and then realize half of that. I understand that, but we've got to find, I think each situation will be fluid and as we work our way through this. So.
Terrific. Sam, are you willing to be around through the break? Maybe people catch you if they have more conversation.
Absolutely. So,
Wonderful.
thank you.
You guys ready to go? Come on up.